You know, 2 weeks of big budget games, I gotta get some indie going on. And with it being October, what better time to hit the horror game scene? So this week I'm bringing you Albino Lullaby. I first saw this game a couple weeks back on Jim Sterling's channel and it looked really cool. Seriously though, if you're watching me and for some reason don't know about Jim Sterling, go check out his channel. A lot of good stuff. Albino Lullaby proudly boasts it as a horror game where you scare yourself. No jump scares or gore or other cheap tricks. And spoiler alert, it succeeds. You know, the best horror movies are the ones that let the audience create the horror. The human mind will come up with the scariest boogeyman in the dark shadows than cinema or games could ever show. And the reason is simple, it's in your mind, so your mind will tailor it to your fears. And that's what this game plays on. It sets up a surreal and macabre haunted house where you scare yourself. Even though it said there weren't going to be any jump scares, I was still carefully peering around corners trying to prepare myself for anything that might come at me. The story is very straightforward. Get the hell out. The game never has to tell you this either. Like, this opening is so freaking genius, let me explain. The developers want you to escape this nightmare. So when you're introduced to the game, you're driving along the road in your car. The ability to freely travel as you want comes to a halt when you next find yourself in a locked cage. Right there, the next instinct by default should be escape. You seemingly have no way to escape your confinement until through a stroke of luck something happens causing the cage to violently shake and the door to break off. Your immediate next instinct as guided by the game is to escape the bigger symbolic cage you found yourself in. Not one word of dialogue has been spoken outside of some various muffles by the strangers in the distance that are there to make you more unsettled and subtly urge you to leave this area. There are various notes to discover as well that will only help lend a sense of urgency to escape this nightmare. Already you have no real idea of what's going on here, you just know it's a good idea to get out. But the notes flesh things out a little more, cluing you into some of the depravities that occur at this facility. For instance, there are several mentions of horrific mutilations being a standard practice here with or without sedatives. The notes also make the albinos a bit more frightening as I'm constantly bringing the mental stability of these freaks into question when I read notes discussing how selling out their brethren is being rewarded knowing full well what kind of terrible punishment the leader of this collective delivers. On to the mechanics. You get some very basic first-person mechanics to start with. You know, a run, a crouch, a jump, and camera control. Eventually you'll get the matches and Buck's clicker. The matches allow you to create little safe zones the albinos can't cross. Prior to getting these, the game teaches you through the design that the enemies can't go past any blue lights. Once you get the matches, you get to utilize the various lamps you've seen throughout the mansion. Your second big power-up is Buck's clicker, which can best be summed up as a giant fuck-off bubble. It's one shot that there are several recharge stations placed around the environment, so it's never really empty. And this is unfortunately where I'm going to have to start my negative comments regarding this title. Once the unknown becomes known, fear dissipates. At first, yes, the game is a gut-wrenching terror where I'm slowly crawling through corridors in a suspenseful anticipation. Even the first couple of times I encountered the albinos, I was trying my hardest to avoid them and stay near the safety of the blue lights. But once I was around them enough, I began to realize how little of a threat they were. They are so incredibly easy to avoid, the only danger you have to fear is being boxed in by them. You really can just hold the run button and fly through sections of the game like a retarded chimpanzee. Once I was able to move past the fear, I didn't care anymore about stealth and subtlety, instead just zooming past all the albinos as they were unable to catch me. And if they got close enough, I had Buck's clicker to tell them to back off. Buck's clicker is something I really wish wasn't in the game as it gives the player too much power in a genre where you want to limit how much power the player has. It's very overpowered for the game due to already being so much faster than the albinos anyway. So as mentioned before, even if you do mess up and box yourself in, you can just use the clicker to be out of harm's way. It is far too empowering to the player. Now granted, the albinos don't stay down for very long, but another minor complaint I have is how they respawn. Instead of having an animation where they awkwardly stand back up, they sort of just teleport in place with a green light. It looks cartoonish and makes them feel even less scary. I hope for Albino Lullaby Episode 2 they create some unsettling means of them propping themselves back onto their feet, because a green teleport just takes away from their impact. Overall though, the game is still a fantastic example of atmosphere and how powerful it can be. At the end of the game, even though I knew how little of a threat the albinos posed, I still found myself back in the slow-moving paranoia I was at in the beginning. It's a short game. If you know what you're doing, you can beat it in about an hour or so it won't overstay its welcome. And I know I've beaten it up about how overpowered you are compared to the threats in hand, but that won't happen till you're almost finished. Buck's clicker is pretty much the signal of the final stretch. Anyway, pick this one up, support the developers, and I can't wait for episode 2.